Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for coming and braving your way through the wonderful Arctic blasts of metropolitan downtown Denver to celebrate Denver's own genius, who finally, in the last 11 years, has been appreciated, not just by misinformation cast about him, but about his work and his legacy and all the people he's inspired. His name was Neal Cassady. I was blessed to know him, and as a friend of Jack Kerouac's, understand why Jack was so inspired by him and what Neal did to bring Jack to 5 points way back before Jack ever wrote On the Road in the 1940s. Not only changed Jack's life, but changed the lives of people since then, and all these years later is being appreciated. But since Moses was in the desert 40 years, Neal was right on schedule. And I'd like to introduce you to the members of our very special Mercury Cafe World Vegetarian Downtown Denver Quartet. I'm sure you all know the trumpet player. He's one of the masters. He teaches here in Boulder, and if he gave senior citizen rates, I'd try to get a scholarship and come study with him myself. He's a monster good trumpet player, and I'm sure all of you who live here already know that. And if you don't, and if you do, you're in for a special treat, Mr. Brad Goode. I'm playing some amazing electronic instruments that can be a bass or anything else that he wants to do. He's a composer, band leader, record producer, and already at a very young man, way ahead of most of us. And he also is an alto saxophone player. So you see there's someone who's able to use technology in a whole way, also has some roots in music of the past and can make that music of the present and music of the future. And it's a joy to be with him the very first time, Mr. Ida Nekrasov. And a drummer who I'm sure you also know. He's one of Denver's finest, and we've played here several times before. And I even learned to pronounce his middle name correctly after several years. He's a master percussionist and musician of all musics, and it's a joy to be with him, Mr. Kevin Charles Smith. And in addition to the introductions, we also have some music. This is going to be one that goes back to time, I guess Neal was visiting New York and probably heard him there, or many other places that he played. But 1955, when I came to New York and played with Charles Mingus as a 24-year-old hayseed, that was me, not Charles. I was lucky enough to meet Sonny Rollins, and he said, "Dave, I have a piece that my folks brought from the West Indies when they moved to New York. So in music, the music takes you wherever you're from. So you hear this tune, you'll be right down there in St. Thomas. So from Denver, snowy Denver, to warm St. Thomas, we're going to start off the evening and take you on a little trip from the Mercury Cafe to downtown metropolitan St. Thomas." Thank you. The next piece is going to be one. Jack and Neal weren't in town when they did this, but I have a nice letter from Jack. And when I saw Neal 2 years, or a year after we premiered this play, he'd heard about it too. It was by a wonderful writer who appreciated everyone at that time, named Arthur Miller. And this was from a play that I was lucky enough to write the score for, called After the Four. It was the opening of the Lincoln Center Theater, but because they hadn't finished the building, and because Neal Cassady had directed it and Arthur Miller had finished the play on time and all these great actors wanted to be in it, they opened it up at an old, funky, abandoned theater called the Anta Playhouse, cleaned the rugs, mopped the floor, and had the Lincoln Center Theater open up in the heart of Greenwich Village, which was so much fun because all these souvlaki chompers, champion chess players, checker virtuosos, wayward spirits from New Jersey, and distinguished bartenders, waitresses, waiters, painters, poets, and all other kinds of people who were the heart of Greenwich Village, made it a beautiful environment to remain in the University of Hangoutology and not be stuck uptown where people would accost you after a performance by saying, "What are you doing next?" In Greenwich Village, sort of like Denver, nobody really judged you by that, but more how you were, how you behaved, who you were as a person. And Arthur Miller was the epitome of that. It was so much fun to be with him. And I was lucky enough to write the music for the play. This is a short part of the score, which was a little waltz that appeared in the play, and now, gradually, like so much of Arthur Miller's work, is having its 17th incarnation, and we played it here before. We'd like to do it again with this wonderful band, a waltz from Arthur Miller's After the Fall. Thank you. Also, we want to thank especially, I'm sure some of you, hopefully, came down because of hearing the announcement of this wonderful event for Neal Cassady and the great jazz artists of Denver who are here with us tonight on the most wonderful radio station just about in the country. I'm not the only one that thinks so because they've been voted the #1 station several times in the past few years, KUVO, called KUVO. And I was lucky enough in 1990 when the Lamont School of Music had me come down as a visiting artist. There was a Leo Block distinguished visiting professor, which is scarcely the way I describe myself in civilian life. But anyway, I was honored to be here and honored to be coming here before that and ever since. And Jose Garcia, a wonderful conga drummer, a maker of conga drums, a master chef, a youth counselor, and an extraordinary person, old friend of mine from Taos, New Mexico, said, man, you got to come down to Kuvo. It's in 5 points. I said, that's where Neal Cassady showed Jack Kerouac what was up when most people in the country had no idea. I'd like to go down there just to beat at 5 points. So I went down to this small community station, and 30 years later, it's bigger and better than ever. And Arturo Gomez is here tonight to grace us with his presence. We want to thank him. He came to the station, I think, in 2004 after being in Miami and having a championship programs there. And just to come to Denver and hear the wonderful music played on Kuvo is inspiring. And it's one station where they not only play the masters of the past, but young people of the present. And most important, great people from the community, so the people who live in the Rockies don't have to go 1,500 miles to hear or know about somebody who's living right in their community. And everything from high school students to young and mature masters, like the 3 gentlemen you see here, all have a home in Kuvo, and so does all great music. So this one would be to celebrate that keepers of that community spirit long before most of us were lucky enough to come to this beautiful country we call the Americas, which is Canada here and south of the border all the way down to Argentina, by the people who believed that we were all here on earth for a while to somehow be together, the Native American folks. And this was taught to me by Floyd Red Crow Westerman, whose childhood friend was Vine Deloria Jr., who taught here for years and years himself. It's called Mostin Shalawachipe Olwan. It's a Native American Lakota Sioux rabbit dance, and I used this in a piece I wrote for the Philadelphia Orchestra. But long before there was a Philadelphia Orchestra or a Colorado or a Denver Symphony or the United States or even the continent of Europe, there was and always will be the beautiful music of Native people, classical because it's been here for thousands of years and stood the test of time. It's called Mastin Shalawachipe Olwan. This is a shiho, a traditional cording flute, and I have a tambourine. Thank you. Replacing my traditional rattle, which is somewhere in the overhead bin of an airline somewhere on the planet, and I hope whoever is playing it has a ball. Mastin Shalawachipe Olwan. And this is for Arturo and his beautiful friend and all the people in Denver and the radio station Kuvo, who bring us jazz as a staple of our life. You got it. Justice. Thank you so much. One of the people that Neal and Jack admired, and all of us admired, I'll be 91 next November, so I was just a kid. Yo, definitely. I have my driver's license to prove it. Anyway, back in 1952, more recent times, from when I was born, I was 21 years old and I met Charlie Parker, and as with so many other people that he met in his short, beautiful lifetime, when he saw I was a wannabe, sincere, young hayseed, hoping to find out something about that beautiful music and trying to play jazz on the French horn and be a classical composer. He didn't think I was a bipolar misfit freak, but rather someone that might be on to something that could possibly be of some value somewhere, and if nothing else, at least the fact that I was trying already passed the audition of being in his University of Hangoutology. And he was such an inspiring person, I never forgot it. And when he was down in my basement apartment, when he was not playing at the Howard Theater, just encouraging a whole bunch of us to try to continue to pursue the path that we felt we were put on here to walk and pursue during our lifetime, he said, you know, don't worry about time, don't worry about anything, just figure you have your whole highway of life and just keep on trucking down that highway and you'll learn a lot from a whole lot of people if you pay attention, which I did. Well, he had a song that was already our anthem in 1952 called Now's the Time, but he'd written that in 1945, and for a 21-year-old, 7 years is a third of your lifetime. So I said, Bird, that was his nickname. I said, Bird, what's it like to write a song that's so old and have it mean so much to a new generation today? He said, well, he said, it's not really old. He said, now was, is, and always will be the right time, because now is the right time. Tonight who want to play the blues, it's just a natural thing, something all of us can do. All you got to do is listen, not worry about who is who. Well, if you're here with Brad Goode and you're here with Ivan too, and you got Kevin Charles Smith all playing the drums for you, you can't go wrong on any song if you listen. I remember what Duke Ellington said, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing, and if it sounds good, it is. So we're gonna take out Charlie Parker's tune, who's an inspiration for us, and we can all get a free seat on that inspiration bus right here at the beautiful downtown cafe in the very, very, very special Mercury Way. Now, if Mercury were here, he'd be delivering a telegram to all of you and saying it's only the beginning. Life and civilization is not through. So be full of cheer and use your creativity, because that's something we were born with. We can practice every day until we're talked out of it. Don't let anybody do that to you, because all of us got a little bit of something we can add as we go. Just remember, now's the time. Thank you so much. And if you get a chance, don't forget to read Neal Cassady's wonderful writings, not what was written about him, but what Neal himself wrote. His son John was going to come down and bear witness, but because of the inclement weather, I think they call it, that means the flight might not land on time. He sends his love, and I'm sure we'll be here next year celebrating it, and he'll come back then and be twice as good and make up for the last year. And again, we want to thank Arturo Gomez, in case any of you weren't here before, but we thanked him. Here he is, Arturo Gomez, representing what everybody in the world can hear now. If you or your friend own a computer, you can go online anywhere in the universe and hear Kuvo. And you can also hear it if you live here. And there's also an app that Arturo can show you if you want to get it on your phone and really be electronically hip, which I'm trying to be. And if someone as old as me can learn that, I'm sure you younger folks can too. And we're going to do one or two more tunes. We don't want to go too long, since Shakespeare said that brevity is the soul of wit. But before we close and do a piece that I wrote with Neal Cassady and Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg, we'd like you to hear Ivan, who's not only an outrageously great musician on what he's playing, and it doesn't look like a bass, but it sure sounds like one. Woo! He also is a master alto saxophone player, and for those of you who stayed up so late and braved the cold, we'd like to play something, without shocking you, that's familiar, hopefully, and also music that we loved during the era that Jack and Neal were here in Denver so long ago, and music that, like the writings of Jack and Neal and so many of the other artists and musicians of then, make the now the time, and now more beautiful, encourages this new generation to create their own art and their own celebration of the now. This is a classic tune that Charlie Parker played. Neal loved it. We all love it. And when you hear Brad and Ivan play, you'll love it too. It's called Lover Man. ladies and gentlemen, Ivan and Brad tearing it up on a cold night. And Kevin Charles making everything sound beautiful. For those of you from out of town, it's Kevin Charles Smith. But everyone that says Kevin Smith forgets the Charles, which is his middle name and his family name, so don't forget that. Kevin Charles Smith. Well, we're going to end up, for those of you who, if anybody here is as old as me, you shouldn't be up this late, but for those of you who are mature enough to remember all the times I've been here, we're going to show a level of suavity, consideration, maturity, and responsibility, and not go 5 hours overtime and end only a little late. And this will be a special tune that was written by the person we're honoring, Neal Cassady, who inspired so many people. And when he would visit New York, and Jack was crashed out on my sofa when he wasn't out on the road, or I wasn't out on the road, and we were all together in the same place, they had a big book where they would write down crazy little one-liners until it sort of looked like a poem, and then turn the next page and write more. Not exactly what you would learn in a creative writing class, but it was definitely creative writing. So Jack decided he would make a little movie out of a huge play he had written and no one was interested in doing, called The Beat Generation. And that languished in someone's closet or a drawer for years. And finally, he took one little section out of it, describing a night at Carolyn Cassady's house with Neal, where a minister and his wife and daughter came over to have a regular adult evening dinner, like so-called normal people would do. And unfortunately, a group of his obnoxious, obstreperous friends came and were so outrageous that finally the minister and his wife and daughter couldn't stand it anymore and left, and Carolyn threw everybody out of the house. A typical evening in suburban California in the 1950s. And it was a wonderful story, so Jack decided, well, you know, maybe he'll get together with Neal and see what he says, and we'll take our little poem and see if we can make a song out of it, and get Dave to write a chamber music jazz score, and get our friends to appear in it. You notice I didn't say the word act, because for those of you who saw the film, we proved that we were not actors by our non-performances. But we did show up to a 50-hour, stoned-out, 3-week party and had a good time. And Robert Frank, who'd never made a film, was such a great photographer that with his wooden tripod and old camera was able to make it look as if it was actually something. And then a friend edited it down from 50 hours of clowning around into a 29-year-old, 29-minute, almost movie called Pull My Daisy. And this is a little song that we did from the film. And now, 60 years later, the soundtrack has finally come out, but you know, there's no rush. As John Keats, the great bebopper of the 19th century poetry scene, said, "Thing of beauty is a joy forever." So we hope you enjoy this little song. The lyrics are by Neal Cassady, Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg. I did the musical part and also appeared in it as Mez McGillicuddy, the deranged French hornist, known as typecasting in those days. And the scat part we called scat, now the young folks call that freestyling, was made up on the spot, and we didn't originate that. Homer did with the Iliad and the Odyssey, since he couldn't see, and sat on a boat and gave out a 2,000-page rap which somebody else wrote down. We don't know what the lira player who accompanied him sounded like, but he must have had some stupendous chops. Also, speaking of stupendous chops, this Monday night we're going to be at Dazzles, and they're going to have Yumi Wang Williams, a great violinist, concertmaster of the Denver Symphony, and Sarah Parkinson, the pianist, Ken Rodnowski, who plays with the Boston Symphony, and his wonderful Yoshiko Klein doing a piece of mine called Greenwich Village Portraits in the last movement of Ode to Lord Buckley, and another piece with Ellen Ferguson, wonderful flautist, first flute with the symphony, and myself playing a little sketch of a piece I'm writing now for another symphony piece. And that's going to be at Dazzles. It's called the Evening of Duos. That's all stuff that's written down, but every note of what I write down comes out of life and playing with fantastic musicians when I'm lucky enough to, like these three gentlemen, Mr. Brad Goode. Ivan the Fantastic, not to be confused with Ivan the Terrible, which was a different Ivan and the wrong textbook in case you're studying it. The fabulous Ivan and his own Kevin Charles Smith. And we want to thank you for coming and hope if you have kids and grandkids, you'll tell them to read a book, and then they can write a book, listen to some music, and then they can write some music, go to see a film, and with an iPhone, they can make their own film, and listen to Kuvo, listen to Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, remember Shakespeare, and check out Colorado, the native cultures here, and the beautiful Western music, and the folk music, and the ballet, and the opera, and the symphony, all the stuff that's right here in town. They don't have to move to New York or Los Angeles and live in a rat hole for 40 years so they can be discovered. It's all around us, and here it's happening and has been for a long, long time, and it's a thrill to be back. And we want to thank the wonderful cafe that fosters art year-round and is a true art center because it has to do with the community and art and not just with how big the building is. Well, maturity and promptness is the message tonight that we want to send. So rather than having this just the beginning of the first set, it's going to be the evening's end. And we want to thank these three great musicians here for putting up with all this stuff. And as Shakespeare said long ago when his good old friend Macduff, in another production of a play called Hamlet, I'm sure you heard long ago, he said, "Enough stuff, Macduff. I think it's time to cut out and put down your horn and go away." So we're going to end the evening with a song that was written long ago. The lyrics were by Jack Kerouac and Neal and Alan, you know. And the part I'm making up right now is eminently forgettable as well. But we go home tonight and join all of you in the story that we'd like to tell. And if you don't tell it and you can't sell it, just give it away to a friend and they can do it themselves. So put all those self-help video promotional shows on other people's shelf. And remember, if you think that you're creative, you were born that way, you're not certifiably crazy. It only means that you are now entering the period of your life where you can pull your daisy. Pull my daisy, tip my cup. All my doors are open. Hop my heart for coconuts. All my eggs are broken. Harp my heart song, harp my light. Sorrows hold me steady. Hip my angel, harp my light. Lay it on the needy. Harp my heart song, harp my light. Sorrows hold me steady. Hip my angel, harp my light. Lay it on the needy. Well, as the night here at the Mercury Cafe comes to its end, there's just one more thing that I would like to say. And we hope that you'll take it in your hearts with you in the snowy night when you go away. And that is, Jack and Neal would be so happy that way back in 1959, we're all here at the Mercury Cafe where we could hear music after we dine. So we hope that you'll come back and bring your friends often, you know, because this is the kind of place to which we all should go. There's not too much more, thank heavens, I've got to say, because we've got Brad Goode here and he can really play. got a young man who can really play. We got three young men who can really play, but he's the one we always like to listen to at the end of the day. His name is Kevin. His middle name is Charles, just like the river you know. And as they say in the vernacular, non-symphonic world, this cat can really blow. So we're going to hear Kevin Charles play for you, and then take it out because the song is almost through. I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. Yeah, your presence is verily out of sight. Tip my cup, all my doors are open. Hop my heart for coconuts, all my eggs are broken. Harp my heart song, harp my light, seraphs hold me steady. Hip my angel, harp my light, lay it on the needy. Harp my heart song, harp my light, seraphs hold me steady. Hip my angel, harp my light, lay That's the way they used to scat sing on Welton Avenue in what they now in the vernacular call way back in the day. And Jack, after coming down to visit Neal or coming out west, which he realized was the best, finally saw when he went to 5 Points there was another world of which he knew nothing till he came. And that's why, like everyone else who comes to Denver, he wished and dreamed of it every night, so hoped someday would be a place where he could remain. And Neal, who was from here, felt the same way, and wherever they went, they always knew each and every day that that was the place where they used to hang out and play, and they could come back again and surely stay. And here they are being celebrated all these years later tonight. And when Jack was just a boy living with his family in the French-Canadian part of Canada, known as Lowell, Massachusetts, or Little Canada, depending on your geographical information, he realized that he was someone who could go way beyond his so-called station. And his father only spoke French to him at home, and since Jack really knew that when he was in that celestial dome of his father's province, he had to show some respect. So he listened. His father said, Mon cher Jacques, si tu restes ici toute la vie, sûrement tu seras obligé à travailler dans une factory comme ta mère a besoin de faire chaque moment de sa vie. Which meant, man, you better get out of town, because if you don't, you're going to end up like a mother working in a factory if you don't get an education and change the station. So because he was a champion football player way back then and a grade A English student as well, he could say amen and goodbye to working in one of those mills or factories all his life, and with his great education and discipline, got himself a scholarship at Distinguished Horace Mann. And no one ever thought there was something possible that no boy from Lowell ever can do what he did, but did he do it right? Because out of sight, it's turned out that he finally got what everybody would dream of doing. He got accepted on a football scholarship to Ivy-covered Celestial top 5 college, which meant that being accepted to Columbia his life was not guaranteed to be a total ruin. Well, the third week in football practice, he broke his leg. He was too proud to beg. He quit academia and went out to sea. And after all kinds of funky day jobs, finally, in 1951, he spent 3 weeks not taking Benzedrine, but just drinking coffee and writing out the 10th version of On the Road. And you can see it in the library if you don't believe me. He'd already written 9 versions, like Mozart, who had Salieri. Jack had his typewriter, and he could do it without it being a heavy load, because the book was written so as fast as he could type, no one could grow, because he already had it in his mind, don't you know? And fortunately, years later, after 7 years of people thinking it was just a stoned-out work of some guy in a black and white red flannel shirt who was a moron football player from Lowell, Massachusetts, and not possibly someone with whom they could work, realized that it was a fantastic original book. Unfortunately, they sent in the third-string critic Gilbert Milstein, since Orville Prescott, Mr. Super Snobberoony, was on vacation doing something else, thank God. And Gilbert Milstein gave it a fantastic, outrageously good review. And all the people in the quality lit Eastern Seaboard establishment, which was even funky back in 1952, were so upset and outrageous and pathologically jealous they didn't know what to do. And finally, when Orville Prescott gave it a nasty review 3 weeks later, it was too late, because it was already out there. It was something everybody could appreciate, and it was already a book that was going around the world and has ever since. So for all of you here at the Mercury Cafe, whether you want to write, paint, play, sing, or do anything of your own each and every day and do your own thing, since we're all born artists until we're talked out of it and creative, don't you know, just remember that you're not certifiably crazy if you realize you can pull your daisy. Brad Goode. A big spasibo to the fabulous Ivan and Kevin Charles Smith and the cafe here. Thank you all. Bless you. Thanks for coming. See you next year, if not before.